I know I've talked about, Secret Adventures several times on this channel, but it's just worth talking about because it's one of those shows that, you know, as a show back in the mid to late 90s just flew under the radar, if you will. I mean, the fact that it went from, different networks for a time to where it is now on PureFlix, it's just really a testimony to how unique and memorable a series like this is, even if it is one that flew under the radar and wouldn't be really discovered until later on, thanks to the internet. But the one thing that really got it, I think, over with a lot of fans, courtesy of the internet and also word of mouth even before then, was one of the main premises of the episodes were the animated segments. The animated segments where Drea would take her two young charges, the ones she would babysit after school, her principal's children, basically her parents' best friend's children, and what she would do to coincide with the lesson to be taught, the message to be, received or taught, if you will, as well, or given. One of the things to coincide with that was these animated segments where basically you had the characters go on a secret adventure and they would turn into, different animals. They would turn into, penguins. They would turn into caterpillars that would become butterflies. They'd become jungle animals like a giraffe, a monkey, an elephant. They would become fishes. They would become skunks. They would become, dogs. Whatever, the premise, message-wise and lesson-wise, that the episode was about, they would basically become an animal to kind of coincide with, that, with that episode, with the lesson or the message, I should say, that the episode was trying to provide for young viewers. Now, what's interesting about its appearance on PureFlix is you would think it would be under Kids and Family or some kind of family section and all that. Nope. It's actually under the teen section, like the 12 to 16 and up, or the 12 to 16 range, if you will. It's under that section, which is a surprise. But then again, when you think about it, the premise of Drea Thomas being in junior high school, I guess they wanted to have something that would relate, to those kids in that same age range, which is why it's in that demographic age group section on PureFlix. But anyway, getting back on topic, the animated segments will always, like I said, to coincide with, the story that the episode was telling, as well as the lessons and the message it was trying to teach. But the one question anybody always had when it came to the animated segments was that just imagination? Were they just like in a room pretending to be these things? Like let's say a teacher, takes, kids in a preschool or a kindergarten or first grade or whatever, and they just pretend to animals or they pretend to fishes or whatever the case may be. They just act out, they play out. Was it, something they were just imagining, sitting around in a room in Drea's house or in a park area, spending time together, well, I guess waiting for the mom to get off work to pick the kids up? Or was it real? Was there something that, that wasn't, that basically from a magical perspective, made the adventures real? Because it seemed that sometimes the younger brother of the young girl, the two kids that Drea would watch, sometimes he would not like the idea of them going on a secret adventure. There's sometimes he'd be like, oh no, and all of a sudden you see this, special effect of sparkles and everything just twirling around, and then next thing you know, you see that sparkle of light just travel to the section, and then you see them, just pop and appear in this animated world as these animals. So you have to again wonder whether or not the animated segments were just something that they would play out, in the area they were at. Like I said, like a teacher would do with the young kids, the young students, pre-K to maybe second or third grade. Or was it real? Was it a magical ability that Drea had, magical gift, from God, if you will, that she had that allowed her to do this? And if that is true, you have to also wonder, because one of the characters that she would interact with at the beginning and at the end of an episode would be her grandfather. So you have to wonder if the grandfather knows about that special ability she had, and maybe it's an ability he used to have when he was her age, and then passed it on to her. We don't really know. I mean, only the people behind the series would be able to tell us whether or not Drea's secret adventures that she would go on with the young charges, the young kids she would babysit, were real, or was just something they were playing out, in their minds, basically, role playing, in the area that we're at. Because because here's the thing, you can only imagine if it was real, Drea's parents suddenly going into the room to check up on her, and her and the kids are gone. And they'd be wondering, like, where did they go? Where did they go? Because the last thing they would expect them to be, or know they would be at, would be this one area. Just imagine if they walked in, all of a sudden they're gone. So you have to wonder, whether or not there's any that in the show itself, whether or not it was a magic ability that would allow them to go into these animated worlds to coincide with the message and the lesson being taught, within the episode, or whether or not maybe that stopped time. Like, all of a sudden, they go on a secret adventure and time just stands still, or them going on a secret adventure that, could last maybe, in the world they end up in, maybe a half hour, a couple of days, or whatever. It's just maybe a few minutes, in the real world. You can't really say whether or not that's fact or it isn't, because again, the only people that would know the truth behind that is the folks that created the series. So it's really something that if anybody was to do a Blu-ray release or an official DVD release or Blu-ray release of the series, maybe even a 4K release, if that was to ever happen. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is, if anybody was to do an official DVD or Blu-ray release of the series in the future, you'd have to speculate that perhaps they could do that. They would get, I should say, not do, but they could get some behind-the-scenes information. And one of the behind-the-scenes information that potentially they could find out is, hey, was the secret adventures real, or was just something that they would act out, or what was going on? Because again, the way the secret adventure would start is you would have a twirling of sparkling light, special effect sparkles, if you will, that would transport them into this other realm, into this animated realm, where they would become these animals or these mammals to coincide with what was going on in that episode. And like I said, the message and the lesson. And the fact that you have to look at how the young brother would react at times when they would do this. So, it's really up in the air. It's really a question that, with a show like this that flew under the radar and, has really gotten, more noticeable and more of a following thanks to the internet, and even now thanks to places like PureFlix, you have to wonder and theorize to yourself and speculate whether or not it was real and it was some kind of magical gift she got from God, or that was passed down to her from her grandfather, who, like I said, at the beginning and the end of each episode, who would appear, I should say, at the beginning and end of each episode most times, and sometimes would be part of the story, but not really. Or was it just, something that she would act out with the young kids, and just role play it in the room they were in. And what we saw, instead of seeing them role play it, like I said, the teacher would do with the young pre-K to first to second graders, that instead of us seeing something like that, instead we would see the animated version of that adventure with them being represented as mammals and animals of all kinds and stuff. Because you kind of think about it this way too. One of the last ones that they did is about Drea potentially moving away, but it doesn't happen. And the animated adventure they go on there, the secret adventure they go on there, they become caterpillars, and then they go into cocoons to protect themselves, save themselves from these hawks. So they go into the cocoons, and then they wait until spring to emerge as butterflies. So, and again, this goes back to what I was saying earlier. you have to imagine that if there is in the continuity of the show, that if it is real, that secret adventure, magic that she has is something that was passed down to her from the grandfather, or it's something, that was a gift from God that was, like I say, passed down maybe from the father to her. You have to wonder again if there is any validation to it, of whether or not them doing the caterpillar becoming cocoon, going into cocoons and going through seasons until they emerge. You have to wonder, maybe a few months when they did that in that animated segment was only like a few minutes. We don't really know. We don't really know the answer to that. But again, it's just. But again, this is what, in my opinion, what I'm trying to say. This is what makes Secret Adventures, in my opinion, something that, even though I know I'm repeating myself when I say it, even though it flew under the radar during its initial run, and is now getting a bit of a following through the internet and places now like PureFlix, it's one of those series that really makes you think, what were those animated segments that coincided with what was going on? Was it real? Was it a special ability Drea had that was either given to her by God or passed down to her by her grandfather? Or was it just them acting out in a room, like I said, a teacher would do with the preschoolers, pre-K, kindergartners, first, second graders, and instead of seeing them acted out, we just see the animated versions of them doing so. You have to wonder. But what are your thoughts? How do you feel about the animated segments in Secret Adventures? Do you think there was, do you think in the continuity of the show, do you think maybe they were real and it was a special ability Drea had that was passed down to her from her grandfather, and it was kind of like a gift from God? Or do you think maybe they were just acting out, they were just acting out those parts, but instead of seeing them acted out, like I said, a teacher would do with the young kids that they would be watching and that they would be teaching, that instead of seeing them acted out, what I'm trying to say is that we would instead, that's what I'm trying to say, not instill, but instead, we would see the animated segments to kind of, represent that instead of seeing them acted out. What are your thoughts? Let me know how you feel about it in the comments, as well as in the live chat during the premiere. Like the video, check out my Teespring store. I have 2 shirts up right now. It's at BW Roses. Be yourself. I think you will enjoy what you get there. I will have more up there in the future, hopefully. But again, let me know what your thoughts are on these animated segments. I do apologize if I was repetitive and rambling my words. Again, as one of my t-shirts say at my Teespring stores, I like doing these videos uncut, uncensored, and on the fly, and by being myself. So let me know what your thoughts are, though, about what I had to say here when it came to the animated segments of Secret Adventures. Do you think in the continuity, the context of the show, they were real? Or do you think maybe they were just being acted out like a teacher would do with pre-K to first to second graders that she would teach, and that instead of seeing them, acted out, instead we got the animated segments? What are your thoughts? Let me know how you feel about it, and I will talk to y'all later.